Welcome to our study on the book of Romans. This is session number 111. Now, what we've been doing is looking at the table of contents. We've gotten over to Proverbs 1:6. We see that a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels. And then verse 6 says to understand a proverb and its interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark saying. And we've been looking at some of those dark sayings, or at least we've been leading up to that. And because what we're looking at is what it means to be a man of understanding, and we've been looking at that in particular with Israel's program, then we know that when God resumes that program with Israel, when this is over at the Blessed Hope, and God resumes that program with Israel, they're going to need to have an understanding of the doctrine written to them about their sonship education. And much, because not everybody is going to come to Christ at the same time, much of what they're going to learn is going to be from some man of understanding who early on got involved in the curriculum and progressed to that place and is now ready to be an instructor and a helper, or to actually, to use the Bible terminology, to be like a father to these members of the believing remnant, to help them come along and understand the truth of what's happening all around them. Because believe me, this is going to be like living in the middle of a tornado when you're out in the day of wrath. Not only is the clock ticking on you, but every day is a fight for your survival. Now I got to thinking about that. And those folks that have been working their jobs every day, when they refuse to take the mark of the beast, they're not going to be able to go into work like they normally did and continue to get a paycheck and operate like that. So on the one hand, as I was thinking about this, I thought, the good thing is, as they're holed up in a cave somewhere, with one of these little battery-powered lanterns, they're going to have plenty of time to get involved with their sonship. I guess that's a plus, isn't it? But, of course, you got to eat too, so I guess you got to figure out, what's happening with that. But anyway, there's going to be some information that's given to them that will only be understood by this level 3 man of understanding. In fact, only the men of understanding. They'll be the only ones on the whole planet that are going to be able to look at some portions of Scripture that we're going to look at ourselves today and to know what that's actually saying. These are dark sayings. What's really behind all this is going to be hidden. And the remnant's going to have that doctrine. So, thankfully for them, there's going to be a man of understanding that's going to be able to help them go through that. Now what I'd like to do is to take you to where we left off last time, and that is something sitting over in the book of Isaiah. God is going to pronounce a judgment against the city of Jerusalem. But what he does is, and I'll show it to you in this verse 1, is he calls the city by a different name. And here it is, Isaiah 29:1. Woe to Ariel, the city where David dwelt. Add ye year to year, let them kill sacrifices. The only thing I'm after in showing you verse 1 is that there is a change from calling it Jerusalem to Ariel. Now we had a discussion on the way in today about why God changed that name. We're going to talk about something involved in that, but I've reserved it for a little later on in the lesson, because what I want to point out right now is what God is going to say to this city and to the inhabitants of this city. So here we pick it up down in verse 9. Stay yourselves and wonder. Cry ye out and cry. They are drunken, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with strong drink. For the Lord hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes. The prophets and your rulers, the seers, hath he covered. And the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, Read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I cannot, for it is sealed. And the book is delivered to him that is not learned, saying, Read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I am not learned. Wherefore the Lord said, For as much as this people draw near me with their mouth, and with their lips they do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their feet toward me is taught by, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people, even a marvelous work and a wonder. For, now here's that colon. What does that tell you is coming? Like a list that tells you what this is going to be. What is this marvelous work? What is this wonder? Here it is. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid. Now, you remember what he said earlier? He said they're going to stagger and stumble, not because they're inebriated. What do you think is going on with this? Does anybody recognize, can you sum this up, what God is doing, just in a single statement, when you look back through this passage? God says, here's the problem. He says, the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed. And he said, you can go to someone that's really smart and say, what is this? And when they say, I can't read it because it's sealed, they're not talking about, oh, it's got a binding on it and I can't open it up. You know what they're talking about? Even though I'm smart, I don't know what that's talking about.
They're not a man of understanding.
That's right. Thank you. They're not a man of understanding. And you go to someone that's not smart and they go, I can't help you because I'm not smart. You go to the smart man, he goes, I can't help you because that's talking about something I have no knowledge of. And then look at this last part, because here's where it's really all going right here. What he's going to do is, he's going to take away all the wisdom. He's going to take away all the understanding. That's the marvelous work. It's going to be like them looking at a book they can't comprehend. And that's why I'm saying the only person on the planet that's going to be able to look at these things and say, I know what's going on, I see it all clearly, is a man of understanding. And boy, if you're part of the remnant and you haven't been saved for very long, you know what? You want to be where that guy is. Because you want him to help you know, don't do this, or now we need to do this, and those kinds of issues. This is now, could you agree with me that what we're looking at here is a blindness that's going to be put on the apostate nation? Oh boy. Now that's a scary thing, isn't it? You're going to be out there in the day of wrath and you're essentially going to be blindfolded. Now, that's going to be something. Now, that describes what God is going to do with that apostate nation. During that time, now I want to show you an analogy. This is very interesting because I'm going to show you a spiritual analogy to this. Remember when Jesus was here, he went into the synagogue, and remember there was the reading of the scriptures that took place every Sabbath day. I want to show you something about this. Look with me in this passage. Luke 4, starting with verse 14. And Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit into Galilee, and there went out a fame of him throughout all the region round about. And he taught in their synagogues, being glorified of all. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up for to read. And there was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah. Now that's the Greek rendering for what Old Testament prophet? Thank you, for Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, now I know what that means. He did this. Isaiah. He opened the book. But I want to notice you something. Just notice something. That means when they brought him that book, what condition was it in when they brought it? That's right. And that's the spiritual analogy. That was a closed book to every one of those guys that brought him. Oh, almost got away from me. That was a closed book to every one of those guys, wasn't it? But when they handed it to Jesus, is he a fully educated son? Yes. You know what he's able to do? He's able to open that book. Now, I want to continue because this gets really interesting. Verse 18, the Spirit of the... And this is where he began to read. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised. By the way, who did Isaiah write that about? The very one that was doing the reading, wasn't it? And so look what he says here, verse 19. To preach the acceptable year of the Lord, and he closed the book. Why would it go to the trouble to even tell you about that? Because you know the Bible's not full of just a bunch of information. It doesn't say, and somebody had made a little pencil mark up in the corner, and it was kind of tattered. It's not interested in giving you that kind of detail. When you see something in there, you know it's pointing you to something. And it says, and he closed the book and gave it again to the minister. You know what that meant? As long as I've got it, this is an open book. And it can be read and understood and explained. But when I get through, I can hand it back to the minister, and guess what? That's a closed book again. They have no idea what's going on. By the way, did they know that's who Isaiah was talking about? When they handed him that book, the guy didn't go, folks, what an honor we have today. The one the prophet Isaiah wrote about is about to read to us out of that prophet. This is going to be great. I mean, he didn't do that. He just handed it to Jesus and thought, well, we read out of Isaiah all the time. Big deal. Well, this is something. So it says, verse 21, and he began to say unto them, this day is this scripture fulfilled in your ears. You know what he's telling them? Yeah, I'm the one. That's what he's telling them there. Well, I just looked at, just noticing, do you see because we just read that passage back in Isaiah where he said, it's going to be like a book that's sealed. And where does Jesus go to read? Right out of Isaiah. And then the description is, they give him the book, it's closed. He opens it, he reads it, he closes it, he hands it back. Because you know what? Those guys don't have a clue. And I just thought, boy, what a great spiritual analogy that was. And that takes us back to the point that in the day of wrath, in the tribulation, in Daniel's 70th week, it's going to be those men of understanding that are actually... Now, by the way, let's be clear. I don't want to confuse you. Is there going to be any simple sons in the tribulation? Any young men? Any wise men? Sure, you're going to have some of all of that, aren't you? Well, let me ask you something. Can any of these guys, can they look at the Proverbs and know anything at all? Is a young man going to be able to look back on stuff back here and know anything? Huh? Okay. Well, in your education, let's just do us for a minute. When you get the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, are you going to have the ability to make those wise decisions, at least in a one-dimensional way? Are you going to have that ability? Yes. And then when you progress to the next level and you get subtlety, are you going to get more complex in your ability to utilize those same skills? And you're going to look at the doctrine, yes, and know what's there? So my point is this, the same is going to be true for them. There are going to be some of all of these appellatives in the tribulation, but there are some proverbs and some other things called dark sayings that you have to be here. This guy has to attain to this in order to understand. And those are not the normal things that educate you as a son. Those are beyond that. Now, you already have a clue to that, folks, because I told you, your education proper as a son ends when you become a wise man, right? When you become a man of understanding, you're not furthering the curriculum, you're just learning it as a father. Yes? And then you attain unto wise counsels. So the proverb that he's given to understand is not talking about the things that make you a simple son or a young man or a wise man. He's already understood that. If he didn't, he couldn't have become a man of understanding. So the proverb that's being hidden is a different proverb than the ones that are sitting in the doctrine. And that's why I left this up. Because here's the table of contents, here's the exhortations, and then from chapters 10 to 29, you've got doctrine. And that takes you all the way through to being a wise man, to being that man of understanding, and the simple son and the young man. It takes you all the way through. You still got 2 more chapters, though, sitting in the book of Proverbs. Now, we're going to take a look at these. In fact, let me just take you to this next, take you back to Proverbs 1:6, because I want you to see that that's what we're focused on in this lesson. What have we got left here? Oh, yeah, we're real good. It says, to understand a proverb, what that whole diatribe I just went through was to convince you that the proverb being talked about in verse 6 is not all the proverbs that teach them this. Are you with me? Because they have to understand that. If you have to be a man of understanding to understand Proverbs chapter 10, verse 1, you never will become a man of understanding. Because that's what allows you to be a simple son. Are you with me? Okay. Are you truly with me, or are you just doing that to get me to move on? You're truly with me, okay. All right, both of you, thank you. Okay. All right. The dark sayings, there are, okay, I guess I'll say it like this. The proverbs being talked about here are a different kind of proverb. They're not part of the education itself. It comes only to a man of understanding. And the dark sayings are about that same category of being a man of understanding. Now, let's see. I'm going to take you now to the last 2 chapters in the book of Proverbs. And we set them off separately because they really are separate. So let's read this first one. Proverbs chapter 30, verse 1. The words of Agur, just making sure I didn't skip my note. The words of Agur, the son of Jacob, even the prophecy, the man spake unto Ithiel, even unto Ithiel and Ukal, surely I am more brutish than any man, and have not the understanding of a man. I neither learned wisdom, nor have the knowledge of the holy. And I put in your notes, and you even got those last time, that there were 3 important things to recognize out of that, and I'm going to put them on the PowerPoint. Number 1, these are not the words of David or Solomon. And the reason you know that is because it tells you who this is. All you have to do is look back and say, it's the words of Agur, the son of Jacob. That's not David or Solomon. Now, doesn't that strike you as a little bit odd? Because this whole thing has been a curriculum that's been given by David to his son Solomon. Solomon's writing down this curriculum. And all of a sudden now you come to chapter 30 and you realize somebody else is doing the talking. That's your first clue to set this off. It's not, how do you know it's not completely disconnected? How do you know that? What would keep you from saying this has absolutely nothing to do with the stuff that's come before? Because it's still in the book of Proverbs. It's just the next part, right? If it was separated, you know what? They'd put it in a different book. It would have been the book of the prophecy of Agur. Okay, now here's the second thing. The one who writes it puts a disclaimer on his own understanding, and he admits that he's not a man of understanding. Now you may be saying, does he really mean it in that way? It doesn't matter how he means it. The truth of the matter is, no matter how you want to look at it, he doesn't understand what he's writing. That's what he's saying. But is it true that in a sonship sense, he's not a man of understanding? That's true. Is it also true that if you just look at it from a plain sense, he just doesn't understand? Well, that's true too. So he's got both of those going for him. And here's the last one. This information is all prophecy. And the reason we know that is how? Yeah, because it said it right there at the start of, in the first verses of the chapter. And let me just back up and give you that. See, it says, the words of Agur, the son of Jacob, even the prophecy. And so, as we get through that, then you know that all that is there. Now what I want to do is take you into the next chapter and introduce this chapter to you. Because 31 starts out the same way. The words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him. Now, when you get to this, you know now that in both of these chapters, you have been told that this is a prophecy. What does that mean? Something off in the future. And can you look at the timeline and tell me where you think these prophecies might come into play? Sure, out there in the tribulation in the day of wrath. Now, there are some things that we'll look at that will tell us how we know that, but that is where that's moving. In fact, this is going to be information. By the way, just think about what we're talking about here. You're talking about a man of understanding, understanding these proverbs, these special proverbs, and these dark sayings out here in the day of wrath when no one else is going to know what that's about, and the remnant's really going to need to understand what's going on with that. That's going to make perfect sense, especially as you look at the timeline with all of that. But now, let me back. I just want to show you that 31 is also a prophecy, and this is talking about the words of King Lemuel. We're going to talk about him in just a minute. But I want to take you back to chapter 30, and I want to show you, before you get into 31, something about this first prophecy. So let me take you there, Proverbs 30, verse 11. There is a generation that curseth their father, and doth not bless their mother. There is a generation that are pure in their own eyes, and yet is not washed from their filthiness. There is a generation, oh how lofty are their eyes, and their eyelids are lifted up. There is a generation whose teeth are as swords, and their jaw teeth as knives, to devour the poor from off the earth, and the needy from among men. Okay, now I'm going to take you on a little trip on this word generation that is going to change your understanding of something. Because when we read the word, look, we're famous for this. We love to see a word and think about it in a particular way. And I want you to see this word generation from the way, did you notice how many times that's mentioned, by the way? Sure. If you back this up, does anybody know which generation is being talked about here?
Sounds like today.
Okay. It does sound like that. But of course, you realize where you are. You're in Proverbs 30. So this is a prophecy that's going to be in conjunction with Israel's program. Now, I know I've set you up a lot on the tribulation, but I'm going to tell you, because of some things that get said in the Gospels, this is a description of a generation that is present during the earthly ministry of Jesus.
Oh, wow. Gosh. Oh, wow.
But listen, it doesn't stop there. That generation gets interrupted, and it takes up again in the tribulation. Do you see these 4 times where he says there is a generation? Jesus, I don't think I have it in my notes. Let me just look. No, I don't. But we'll talk about it. There is a generation that curseth their father and doth not bless their mother. And then the next one starts, there is a generation. That's a different issue. Let me ask you, when Jesus was here, did he ever say, you have heard it said by them of old time, honor thy father and thy mother. But I say unto you, and then you know what he does? He talks about a little thing that they did in which they actually avoided the commandment to honor their father and mother and could remain blameless in the way. You know how they did it? And I should have put the scripture in there, but I didn't think we'd have time to look at it. I just wanted to describe it to you. He talks about you could make okay, let's do it like this. Here's an older father and mother. And now, you know what? They're being cared for by their son. And their son knows they have some things. They have some wealth. They have some property. You know, they have some valuables. And he also knows this. He's got to take care of them. And he can either spend that on taking care by honoring his father and mother, or he can try to keep that for himself. But he knows if he does that, he violates the commandment. He has to take care of his father and mother. Honoring your father and mother isn't just going like, I really love my mom and dad. God bless you. Be your warmed and filled. That's not it. So you know what they did? They could go to the temple. They could go to the priest and they could say, I'm going to give this to the temple when I'm gone. And you know what that meant? That meant I can't spend it on them because this is going to the temple. But he gets to use it. And whatever's left, it's been dedicated to the temple. And Jesus said, by your tradition, you have made the commandment of none effect. You say you honor father and mother, but you don't. You found a way around that. That's that first one. There is a generation, verse 12, that is pure in their own eyes, and yet is not washed from their filthiness. Does anybody remember when Jesus addressed that one? What did he say to them? Just think. It's in the Gospels, and you've heard it over and over again. Well, okay, but okay, well, I could see that, but there's something even more specific to this. What? The whitewashed. You know. Somebody help her out. I thought sure I had some verses in here on this, and I don't. I sure don't. No, I don't. Okay. Does anybody remember? What does he say? Outwardly, you appear to be righteous. You're like a whitewashed sepulcher, full of what? Dead men's bones. Do you remember that? What was a sepulcher? I remember when I went to Bible college, I had a buddy, he wasn't familiar with the word, and he said, you're a whitewashed sepulcher. I've never forgotten that. I didn't want to be a whitewashed sepulcher, that's for sure. That was a grave. That was just a tomb. And he said, you know what? You look good on the outside, but if you go on the inside, that thing is rotten and dead. And who did he say that to? The religious leaders. Do you remember that? And so, what is he doing? There's a generation that's pure in their own eyes. And he says, and yet is not washed from their filthiness. All four of these, in verse 13, verse 14, he talks about every one of these as he rebukes them in his ministry. This is a generation that's alive at the time of the Messiah. By the way, if you go back to Isaiah and look at the context, you'll see more evidence about that. Now, what I'm trying to show you here is when he talks about there's a generation that does this, there's a generation that does, there's a generation that's like this, there's a generation that's like this. What is he talking about when he says there's a generation? What's he talking about? Yeah, he's talking about a people, isn't he? Yeah. There's somebody in particular, right? Yeah. There's somebody that doesn't honor their father. There's somebody that's really not washed from their filthiness, that thinks they're all cleaned up. By the way, isn't that what the Pharisees thought? They were just righteous. And this word generation, now I gotta show you this because this word generation is really important. Now here's what we do with the word generation. We're living in the dispensation of grace. Then here's what happens. We know some verses. In fact, I don't have it in my notes, but let me turn you over there. Turn to Matthew 24. I mean, I have it in here, but it's not going to show up till later, but you need to see it now. I should have put it in before. Matthew chapter 24. Matthew 24, verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall what?
Fall from heaven.
Yeah, fall from heaven. We talked about that on the way in this morning. It doesn't say that it's strange. Aren't we supposed to be reading the stars withdraw their shining? But this verse says they fall from heaven. Except for the two ladies that rode with me in this morning. What is the huge event that happens at that time? We're talking about, you know what, the Lord's come back. Well, we take their place, but there's a huge event that's going to happen. You're already in the heavenly places by the end of at the end of the tribulation, you've been sitting in the heavenly places. But there's an event that's going to happen. Anybody remember what that is? It's a huge event.
The division?
I'm sorry?
The division?
Okay, there is a division, but it's after that. After the division has taken place, after the advent. Remember the previous verse, they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. What's going to happen after that advent? It's a big event. It's a huge event. I'll tell you, when we're on the way in, Billy and Pam are giving me these answers. I'm going, bigger than that. Anybody want to venture a guess? Huh? What?
Their life on earth will end.
Well, okay. Give me a Bible. Give me a Bible. Okay. All right.
But I can't.
Okay. Anybody?
After the second advent?
Yeah, after the second advent, but before the start of the kingdom.
The great battle.
Well, after the battle. Yeah, you get a new heavens and a new earth.
Yeah.
That is a pretty big deal, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And guess what? And how is that described? And the heavens roll together as a scroll. You know what that looks like if you're standing on this earth? You know how a scroll rolls together? It looks like the stars are falling to the earth. You're talking about the new heavens and the new... You're talking about the being made new. Now, you've already been in the heavenly places, but then you're going to be sitting, guess what? In some new ones. Some things are going to be different. Well, I'm not trying to get to that, but let's just keep going here. And it says, and immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give her light. There's the start of the 30 days of darkness. And the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be. There's the end of the 30 days of darkness, see? And the Lord comes back, and all that, tumbles out. Verse 31, and he shall send his angels with a great sound of the trumpet, and gathers the elect from the four winds, one in heaven to the other. Now learn a parable of the fig tree, when his branch is yet tender, and putteth forth the leaves, you know summer is nigh. Likewise, you know all that's saying? Someone says, oh, that's the fig tree, and so that's Israel. Well, when you go to the other gospel, and it describes this, you know what it says? It says, and all the trees. Look, you know what? When I go out in my front yard, and I see the leaves coming out on my trees, you know what I know? Yeah, no, when the leaves are coming out. Yeah, it's spring. Summer is nigh. In other words, it's almost time, right? I mean, here we go. So he's just saying, now learn a parable of the fig tree. When its branch is tender and putteth forth leaves, you know it's summer's nigh. So likewise, you see all these things, know it's near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Now, you know what we did with that? We took that generation, we said, oh, the budding of the fig tree, that's Israel becoming a nation. You know what's really funny is, nobody preached that before 1948. Nobody. But in 1948, we read that and we went, oh, that's Israel's the fig tree, and so they became a nation in 1948, and so the generation won't pass before all those things will be fulfilled. And what were all those things? Well, they concluded at the second advent of Jesus Christ. Yes? So you know what then they said? Well, if the generation won't pass, we got to figure out how long a generation is. And there was your error. Because when the Bible's talking about a generation, it's not talking about a length of time, it's talking about a people. And I'm going to prove that to you. And what did we do, though? We said, well, a generation won't pass, so how long's a generation? What was the first guess that came off of that? 40 years. Where'd they get that? Well, the wandering in the wilderness, remember? They wandered till that generation died off. They wandered for 40 years. So they said, oh, well, when Israel became nation in 1948, there's the fig tree putting forth leaves, a 40-year generation that made 1988. And so some people said, oh, well, you know what, the rapture is going to happen in 1988. But some smart people said, no, the rapture can't happen in 1988 because what's happening in Matthew 24 is not the rapture, it's the what? It's the Advent. And you know there's at least how many years between the rapture and the Advent? 7. At least 7. So if you take your 7 years off of that, then the rapture had to happen in 1981. But if I'm not mistaken, 1981 came and went, and the same guys that were preaching that were still here.
They didn't make it.
Yeah. And then 1988 came. Because some people said, no, it's 1988. And then, remember I told you about Wisnett that wrote the book, 88 Reasons Why Jesus Will Come Back in 1988. Yeah, it didn't work out, did it? Because 88 came and went. Then you know what they had to do? They had to up the generation. Does anybody remember what the next number was? 70 years. It's a 70-year. So they found a reference in the Bible that talked about a generation being 70. I'm going to tell you again. The error is in making a generation a number of years. It's not a reference to a number of years. It's a reference to a group of people. But they did another one, so they did 70. Well, let's add 70 to that. 2018. But wait, that's to the Advent. So you got to at least subtract 7 years off of that. Guess what you got now?
We're still here.
2011. Uh-oh.
I missed it both times.
See, you know, Lord's come back twice. Bob missed it both times. You're going to get one more strike, and then, you know. You see what I'm saying? And somebody will come along and go, oh, no, it's 2018. But you know what, then they fudged it, and then they went, well, okay, 2011, that won't work. But guess what? The Mayan calendar says the end of the world is going to come December the 21st. So let's just do that, 12/21 of 2012. So now they're all waiting for that. Well, in December this year, the world's coming to an end. You say, well, Brother Mike, you think you're so smart? You think you know better? I am not so smart, but you don't have to be smart to know better. You just have to know a little bit about this book and believe what you read. The world's not coming to an end December the 21st in 2012. I'm going to make another prediction. And you don't have to believe me because I'm not a prophet. But here we go. In December of this year, we will not have raptured out. You're going to be here. Okay, good. I'm not done with my sonship. But I'm just saying, you're going to be here. I know everybody's looking at the stuff going on in the Middle East, and you know what they're saying? The same thing they've been saying for hundreds of years. I tell you what, the coming of the Lord, it's right around. You can't tell me the coming of the Lord is not right around the corner. Hey, we're doing that in 1948. Remember when the millennium changed? Y2K. Everything's going to close down. All the computers are going to go work. I'll lose our money. We need to go get our money out of the banks quick because the banks will fail. You know what I was saying? If you run and do that, they will. You'll make it fulfill. Stop panicking. I remember a guy showed up the Tuesday Bible study I was doing in Glen Rose. He was standing outside where I pull up and park, and he was pacing back and forth when he got me. He said, tonight, he said, I sure hope you're going to address the Y2K issue because we were just right on. It was the Bible study before the turn of the new year. And I said, I sure am. He said, great, because I'm going to tell you what, people need to be putting food back on the shelf. They better get their batteries. They better get their lanterns. They better get their money out of the bank. They better get, and I went, I'm going to talk about it, but I'm not going to be talking about it like that. And he was disappointed. You know what? He never came back to another Bible study. He was disappointed. Well, I take it back. In all those years since then, he's been back twice, but that's only been in the last year. But he was disappointed because I wasn't going to act like, an alarmist about a situation that I did not believe. Because, you know what? Here's the thing. Now, I want to turn to these verses in the Bible. Hello, you're in the dispensation of grace. If you're going to find anything about what's happening now, you're going to find it in Paul's epistles, not in Israel's program. Guess where every one of those verses were from? Israel's program. Guess where the Matthew thing is from? Israel's program. People can't, I don't know if they can't or they don't want to come to grips with that. Or maybe it's a combination. But my point is, now it's going to be December 21st, 2012. Rapture's not happening this year. I have more predictions I could give you, but it will disappoint you greatly. But I'm going to tell you, in December of next year, you're still going to be here. You say, why? Because you know the day of the rapture? I don't know the day of the rapture. But I know what has to happen to trigger it. And it's not going to happen in the next year. You can't shut that down in a year. Now, you might take steps toward that, but you won't get it done in a year. How do you know? It would be like me saying, we're going to build a new building. And I stand up and say to you, and we're going to build it. We're going to build it. And I say to you, this is not going to be finished tomorrow. Well, you may not like that, but the truth is, you just physically can't get it done in a day. I'm telling you what has to happen. And the total shutdown of the grace message can't be done in a year. Some of us will continue to do it underground. Now, can you take steps toward that? Sure you can. Now, I know that probably this is the only group I know of that's saying, okay, if we got a little time for the rapture, I'm okay with that. Because I'm trying to get somewhere in my sonship. That's how I feel. I want to get a little further along. But you realize you can't preach that in any other church. You go in there and say, boy, I sure hope the Lord holds off on the rapture. Oh, boy, where's the tar and feathers? Oh, but I understand that. That's the way I used to be. But I'm trying to get back to, let me get back to this generation thing. Because what's going to happen, look, what's going to happen when 2011 runs out, sorry, it's already run out. When 2012 runs out, and we didn't go, and the Mayan calendar, by the way, that's not even what that thing was doing. But, okay, and so it's not all gone then. We're going to get to 2018, and you know what? When we get to 2018, you know what they're going to do? They're not going to stand up and go, you know what? Maybe we can't do this after all. They will never come. They get it wrong, 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 and they will never say, you know what, maybe I've got an error somewhere in my fundamental concept of this. Because it keeps getting wrong. They'll never do that. You know what they'll just do? They'll keep upping it. I can't wait till the day comes where some Bible teacher stands up and says, well, the fig tree putting forth leaves is Israel, and Israel became a nation in 1948. And you know what we've discovered? That a generation is 125 years long.
120 because it was Noah.
Oh, well, let's do that one. Okay. 120 years long. And they'll add it up. And they'll say, and there you go. And I'm going to tell you, that has nothing to do with it. Because this is not talking about a period of time. When you read the word this generation, he has already used that phrase, Jesus himself, in the Gospels so many times, your thinking is supposed to default to a group of people, not a period of time. And I want to show you just a few of these, and you can study it out in the details on your own. But look, let's start back to where these were first described. And let me just kind of go through these in a hurry here. So here we go. Deuteronomy 32:5. They have corrupted themselves. By the way, if you're in Deuteronomy 32, you know exactly where on Israel's timeline this prophecy is talking about. They have corrupted themselves. Their spot is not the spot of his children. They are a perverse and crooked generation. Does anybody ever remember where else that phrase came up? A crooked and perverse generation? When did it ever come up again in your Bible? In the Gospels, with the Lord. Here's the next one. Psalm 14:5. They were in great fear, For God is in the generation of the righteous. Who do you think is in the generation of the righteous? Psalm 14:5.
Well, that's Israel, but I'm there now. Justification.
Okay, if you're good, huh? What'd you say, Eric?
King David's period.
All right, there was someone in David's period that was part of that. Is there anyone else?
Job.
Would you say Job was in a generation of the righteous? I would agree with that. Who else?
Noah.
Who else? Who else? Go forward. Go forward.
David.
David, we said. Who else? So, okay, go way forward. I went David, I go forward. There you go, Solomon. Okay, all right. Go way forward. Yeah, what about the little flock that followed Jesus? Are they part of a generation of the righteous? Let me ask you, what about the believing remnant out here in the day of wrath? It's not about a period of time, it's about a group of people. All of these answers are right. Because he's talking about, do you not realize the Lord has a generation? And then there is a generation that is not His. Yes? By the way, you remember how Matthew starts out? The book of the generation of Jesus Christ. Then you know what you have? You don't have a period of time, you have a list of people. By the way, if you want to make that a period of time, how long is that generation? Give me a break. He's not talking about a period of time. Talking about a group of people. I know my deal went off. Is that what you're signaling? No? Oh, okay. Well, maybe we'll take... No, let me just do this and we'll take a break. Here we go. Isaiah 53. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He's brought as a lamb to the slaughter, as a sheep before his shears is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison, from judgment, and who shall declare his what? Who is that talking about? He was brought as a lamb before the... Who is that? That was Jesus, see? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. Made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. But he has a generation. Who shall declare his generation? Who's talking about that? Isaiah. Can you be part of the Lord's generation and be back here in the Old Testament? Can you be part of the Lord's generation and be present during His earthly ministry? Can you be part of the Lord's generation and be out here in the day of wrath? Then you tell me, is He asking us to consider how long a generation is, or is He asking us to look at a group of people? He's looking at a group of people, and that's my point in this. Now, I want to do more about this, but I'm going to wait till we come back from the break, because I need you to see this from His lips. Because He's going to go, this generation, this generation, this generation, this generation, this generation, this generation, and then He's going to come along in Matthew 24 on the Mount Olivet Discourse and say, and this generation's not going to pass until these things fulfill. And what you realize then is that that's going to happen with a group of people, not in a period of time. And even if you're going to make it a period of time, you can't take a prediction in Israel's program and stick it in the middle of the dispensation of grace. And since I'm on it, some wise guy listening to the deal right now is going, well, the thing really didn't start in 1948. It actually started in 1967. But you know what happened in 1967? You had this political move that really allowed Israel to operate now as a nation. What was that called? Come on, Sandy, I know you've heard those guys talk about this. This is called, there was an event. It was a political, it was like the Bay of Pigs. But I mean, it's like, there was something. What was that? It's called the, huh? No, it wasn't the 7-Year War, but I mean, it was an event but it was a political declaration. It was a paper that was issued. Oh, what was that in 1967? But there was a war, you're right. I mean, don't What was that? Oh, come on. I can't believe I'm not thinking of this. Whatever it is. They come along, they're going to say, oh, it was 1967. Well, of course, if you do the 40 years for that, you know what? Now you're 2017, you take away the 7 for the tribulation, and now you're 2010. Whoops, that doesn't work. So now, okay, well, you know what? It's a 70-year generation. Rah! Theologian want a cracker.
When I think of that at 2 o'clock this morning, I'm calling you.
Yeah, call me. I want to know because I'll be sitting up in bed going, what is that? What is that?
Well, that's silly to fiddle it, because the Bible says man will not know.
Well, you know what? And you know what? In that, he says, he does say, in Israel's program, he's talking about the Advent anyway, not the rapture. But he says nobody knows the day or the hour. No, they don't. Well, here's what they do, though, to get around that, Bertha. They go, well, you can't know the day or the hour, but you can know the season. That's how they do it. I mean, but you know what? They're